Hello. All right, we are on chapter 9, page 99. Now, just to review really quick, we had Tom, Joe, and Huck. They left the town. They went to an island just to kind of get away because they were all frustrated with everything that was going on. And they loved being away, but after a little bit, they all became homesick, so they missed their home. But they were boys, and they were like, I'm not going to admit that to my friend. So they all kind of just held it in, except Joe. Joe finally said, I miss home, I want to go home. Tom and Huck were like, psh, you're crazy, dude. No, we're fine. But that night, Tom went back home. And what did he see? He saw Aunt Polly and he saw Joe's mom. They were just crying so much because they missed their boys and they thought maybe they might be dead. Now, do you remember what they did, the town did, to see if they could find any dead bodies in the river? Do you remember they had a boat and they had a cannon and they would blast the cannonball into the water hoping that a body would come up? Isn't that crazy? All right. So, Tom saw Aunt Polly crying. He was going to write her a note saying, hey, I'm alive, everything's okay. But then he was like, no, I'm not going to do that. He had an idea. And we don't know what that idea is yet. But he didn't write the note and he left to go back to the island. So that's where we're at right now. Now for your assignment this week, you're answering the question. It's kind of like in preparation for your paper. You're answering the question, who is the most interesting character in chapters 9 through 12? So we're just focusing on these 4 chapters, okay? Only these chapters. And you need to figure out who is the most interesting character in chapters 9 through 12. So you need to find 2 quotes that support either Tom being the most interesting, Joe, Huck, and we'll have some other characters. So you need to find 2 quotes for one character, only one character, okay? So you can find a lot of quotes for all of the characters, but then in the end you have to choose one character that's the most interesting in chapters 9 through 12, okay? So I'll help you find some quotes for the characters and everything, but in the end you have to follow the race format, okay? So you have to kind of write a thesis statement, say who's the most interesting character, give 2 reasons why, then you have to give a quote or a paraphrase of who the most interesting character is, and then you have to explain that paraphrase or quote. And you have to follow the in-text citation formatting that I laid out for you. Okay, so that's what your assignment is. If you have questions, ask me and I'll answer anything. And follow the examples that I've given you, okay? That will help you as well. All right, let's get to chapter 9. The pirates return. It was morning when Tom finally returned to camp. Huck and Joe were already up and glad to see him. They had begun to worry where he had gone. During a sumptuous breakfast of bacon and fish, Tom recounted his adventure back in the village. So sumptuous is really delicious, and he recounted, so he told them about his adventure. When he finished, he hid himself away in a shady nook and slept until noon. The day passed slowly, with the boys hunting for turtle eggs, fishing from the shore, and swimming until they were tired and ready to rest. A sadness came upon each of the boys, and they fell to gazing across the wide river to the town. So basically they were missing home again, and they were just looking at their town across the river. Tom found himself riding Becky in the sand with his big toe. So he misses Becky. Finally, Joe broke the silence. Oh, let's give it up, he said. I want to go home. It's so lonesome here. So it's lonely. Oh no, Joe, you'll feel better soon, said Tom. Just think of the great fishing that's here. I don't care for fishing. I want to go home. Tom tried again. But Joe, There isn't another swimming place like this anywhere. It was no use. Soon, even Huck was convinced that it was time to give up and go home. Tom, however, remained firm. I won't. He refused to leave the island. I felt dumb doing that, you guys. But firm. He would not leave, okay? By this time, it was beginning to get dark, so Huck and Joe began gathering their things. They didn't want to leave without Tom, but he absolutely refused to consider giving up and going home. Tom, I'd wish you'd come too, said Huck. Now you think it over. We'll wait for you down by the shore. Tom stood watching as Joe and Huck walked slowly away. Suddenly, an idea hit him, and he ran after his friends, yelling, "Wait, wait, I want to tell you something." Joe and Huck stopped and turned around. When Tom reached them, he began explaining his secret plan. So here it is. The boys listened quietly until they saw the point he was driving at, so they understood what his plan was. They're like, I like it. Yes, they agreed. Tom had a wonderful plan, even though it meant they would have to stay on the island 4 more days until Saturday. 4 more days! They're staying on the island for 4 more days. I'm trying to think, how long have they been there already? We'll have to look that up. You look that up. Somehow, knowing that they would be going home soon helped Tom, Huck, and Joe pass those days quickly. They fished, swam, played games, and made plans for their return. When Sunday finally came, the town was mournful and silent. Mournful is when you feel very sad, okay? It's like when somebody has passed away, somebody has died, you mourn for them, you miss them, okay? The Harpers, that's Joe's family, and Aunt Polly's family were full of grief. Grief is another word for sadness, but it's even stronger than sadness. It is just, oh, you hurt. The villagers hardly talked, and there was a strange feeling of sadness in the air. Becky Thatcher found herself moping around the deserted schoolyard, so nobody was in the schoolyard, feeling miserable and talking to herself. So moping is like when you're super sad and you're hunched over and just nobody can help you. You're just sad. Oh, if only I had that brass doorknob again, she murmured. But I haven't anything now to remember him by. So she wished she had kept that brass doorknob. And she choked back a little sob. Becky regretted what she had done to Tom. She felt bad. Now she was sure she would never see him again. Just the thought of this touched her so deeply that tears began to roll down her cheeks. Nearby, a group of boys talked in low voices about Tom and Joe. They retold stories of their 2 lost friends and shook their heads in disbelief at the thought that they were really gone forever, so they didn't believe that these 2 were gone. At noon, the church bell began to toll, so it began to ring. The villagers gathered in the church, and only the sound of whispering was heard. No one could remember when the little church had been so crowded, so everybody came. A hush came over the villagers when Aunt Polly entered, followed by Sid and the whole Harper family, so it went quiet. As the silent, black-clad procession made their way slowly down the aisle, the whole congregation stood in respect. So their black-clad means they're wearing all black, and the procession is the line of the people coming in. So it's Aunt Polly and the family coming in. That's the procession. The funeral service began with the minister describing the boys in glowing terms. Glowing terms is like he has nothing but good to say, so he's only making them sound like they're the most amazing boys ever. He related many incidents in their young lives, and as he talked, the congregation became more and more moved, so touched. They really liked what he was saying. Soon there was hardly a dry eye in the church, so they were crying. A slight rustling sound in the gallery went unnoticed. So rustling, It's a trash can, guys. Okay, so it went unnoticed. They didn't hear it. But a moment later, the creaking of the church door interrupted the service. The minister raised his weeping eyes, so his wet eyes, because he had been crying, and stood transfixed. So he's like, he can't move. He's not blinking. He's just like, what? First one, then another pair of eyes followed the minister's gaze. So everybody was like, what's he looking at? Then, almost at the very same instant, the congregation rose. So they stood up and stared at the 3 dead boys. So quotation marks, so it's fake. It's like, wait, they were supposed to be dead. And these quotation marks mean like they were dead, but no, they're not dead. Stared at the 3 dead boys marching up the aisle. They had hidden in the gallery and listened to their own funeral sermon. So they were listening the whole time and watching as people were crying, and they were listening to the minister say, like, these boys are amazing. Oh my gosh. Aunt Polly and the Harpers threw themselves upon the boys and smothered them with hugs and kisses. So they grabbed them and hugged them. Suddenly, the minister shouted at the top of his voice, "Praise God, sing, and put your hearts into it." And the whole congregation did. The sound of their voices shook the rafters, so that's the ceiling. While Tom Sawyer, the pirate, looked around the church at his friends and confessed in his heart that this was the proudest moment in his life. So it was the best moment ever. You guys, they saw their own funeral. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness, these boys are crazy. Okay. You guys. So who is the most interesting character? I think in this chapter, for me, Tom is the most interesting character. So why is he the most interesting character? So Tom is the most interesting character because he creates awesome plans. He has awesome adventures. And this on page 108, my quote would be, then, almost at the very same instant, the congregation rose and stared at the 3 dead boys marching up the aisle. They had hidden in the gallery and listened to their own funeral sermon. That's my quote. Tom is the most interesting character because he has awesome adventures. An example in the book is when the congregation rose and stared at the 3 dead boys marching up the aisle. They had hidden in the gallery and listened to their own funeral sermon. This proves that Tom has awesome adventures and is interesting because he saw his own funeral. He thought that plan through. Like, what? That is crazy. Anyway, that's just a little example, okay? So, look and see, who do you think is the most interesting character in this chapter, and find some quotes that support your reasons, okay? All right, and then we'll move on to chapter 10, okay?